Do not let her drink that. Marcus Reed's voice cut across the 58th floor boardroom just as Evelyn Carter lifted a porcelain cup toward her lips. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward him. The room went silent except for the soft hum of the city far below the glass walls. Marcus stood near the service entrance in a navy cleaning uniform, one hand still holding the handle of a gray supply cart. He had spent the last 3 hours polishing marble floors no one noticed, emptying trash bins no one thanked him for touching, and wiping fingerprints from windows that looked down on Manhattan like the whole city belonged to the people seated at the long walnut table. Evelyn Carter sat at the head of it, pale beneath the white light, her dark blonde hair pulled neatly behind her ears. She was 32, the founder of Carter Meridian, and one of the youngest Millionaire chief executive officers in the city. She had built a company that appeared in business magazines, on airport screens, and in the hands of every investor who wanted a piece of the future. Yet that morning, she looked like she had not slept in days. Her fingers tightened around the cup. A faint tremor moved through her wrist. Marcus had seen it before. He had seen the way she pressed 2 fingers to her temple when she thought no one was watching. He had seen the way she stopped halfway down the hallway last Thursday, breathing carefully as if the air had become too thin. He had seen the untouched lunches, the black coffee, the herbal tea delivered to her office every afternoon at exactly 3:15. Most people in the building saw Evelyn Carter as a headline. Marcus saw a woman who looked tired enough to disappear inside her own suit. "Excuse me?" Victoria Blake asked. Her voice was smooth, sharp, and perfectly controlled. She stood beside Evelyn in a charcoal gray dress, holding a folder against her chest. As chief operating officer, Victoria moved through the building like every hallway had been built for her. Her eyes traveled from Marcus's work shoes to the cleaning cart, then back to his face. "Did you just interrupt a board meeting?" Marcus swallowed. His heart beat hard against his ribs, but he did not look away from Evelyn. The steam rising from the cup carried a sweet herbal smell. Lavender. Citrus peel. Something bitter underneath. It had been in the air outside Evelyn's office for weeks, mixed with the scent from the new diffuser on her shelf. Marcus knew that smell because his daughter, Nia, had once reacted badly to a similar oil blend at a school event. He remembered the small, frightened look in her eyes and the nurse telling him to pay attention to patterns, not just symptoms. "I think she should wait," Marcus said. "That tea does not smell right." A few people at the table exchanged embarrassed glances. One man gave a short laugh and looked down at his notes. Victoria's smile did not reach her eyes. "Mr. Reed, you are here to clean the floors. You are not here to diagnose the chief executive officer." Marcus felt heat rise into his face. He knew that tone. He had heard it when landlords assumed he could not afford a better apartment. He had heard it when people spoke slowly to him as if a uniform had erased everything he knew. But Evelyn had not taken a sip. Her eyes, gray and tired, remained on Marcus. "What do you mean?" she asked. The question was quiet, but it changed the room. Marcus pushed the cart aside and stepped 1 pace forward. "I have noticed you get sick after the tea arrives," he said. "And after the diffuser is turned on. It might be nothing. But it might not." Victoria placed a hand on the back of Evelyn's chair. "This is ridiculous. Evelyn, you have a presentation in 10 minutes. Evelyn looked down at the cup. For a second, Marcus thought she would dismiss him. Then her face lost what little color it had left. The cup slipped from her fingers, struck the polished table, and spilled amber tea across the documents waiting for her signature. No one moved. Marcus did not know it yet, but the stain spreading across that table was the first crack in a secret powerful people had spent years trying to keep hidden. The amber tea spread slowly across the walnut table, soaking into the edge of a contract that had been waiting for Evelyn's signature. For one long second, nobody spoke. Then Victoria Blake reached for a linen napkin, her movements quick and polished, as if a spilled drink were the only problem in the room. "It is fine," she said, though her voice had lost its easy confidence. "Evelyn just needs a moment." But Evelyn did not move. She sat very still, one hand pressed flat against the table, her gray eyes fixed on the cup as though it had become something unfamiliar. Marcus watched her breathing. Too shallow. Too careful. He had learned to notice details because Nia had taught him to. When your child was 8 years old and had spent one frightening afternoon coughing after a scented candle had been lit too close to her at a birthday party, you learn not to ignore small changes. You learn that the body often whispered before it cried out. "Ms. Carter," Marcus said quietly, "do you need some air?" Victoria turned toward him. "You have done enough." The words landed softly, but everyone heard what they meant. Go back to the service hallway. Go back to the place people like you are expected to stay. Marcus felt the old anger rise in his chest, sharp and familiar. He thought of the rent notice folded in the kitchen drawer at home. He thought of Nia's purple backpack hanging by the front door, waiting for him to come home before she fell asleep. He thought of all the times he had kept his head down because keeping his job mattered more than being right. But Evelyn's face was still pale. "I can walk her to the lounge," Marcus said. "There is a window there. Security can handle it," Victoria replied. "Marcus," Evelyn said. Her voice was thin, but clear enough to stop Victoria. She looked at him, not at the board members, not at the papers, not at the city beyond the glass. "What did you notice?" Marcus hesitated. Every person at the table was watching him now. He could feel their doubt before he even spoke. "The tea comes at 3:15 most days," he said. "About 10 minutes after the diffuser starts. Then you usually leave your office early, or you sit down with the lights off. Last week, I saw you drop a folder near the elevator. Yesterday, you had to hold the wall in the hallway." A board member with silver hair frowned. How would a janitor know that? Marcus met his eyes. "Because I work here." The room went quiet again. Evelyn looked down at the tea stain, then at Victoria. "Who ordered the diffuser?" Victoria's expression did not change, but her fingers tightened around the folder. "The wellness consultant recommended it." "You said the office felt stale." "And the tea?" Evelyn asked. "It is the same herbal blend you have been drinking for months." Victoria gave a small laugh, trying to make the question sound unreasonable. "Evelyn, you are exhausted. You have been under pressure. This is not the time to entertain theories from the cleaning staff." Marcus looked at the porcelain cup. A faint ring of dried residue clung near the rim. The scent was stronger now that the tea had spilled. Lavender, citrus, and something that reminded him of the eucalyptus oil Nia's doctor had told him to keep away from her. He did not know what it meant for Evelyn. He only knew it did not belong in a room with someone who had been getting worse. "I am not asking anyone to believe a theory," Marcus said. "I am asking you not to drink it until a doctor looks at it." Victoria's eyes flashed. "You are overstepping." "Maybe," Marcus answered. "But if I am wrong, you lose 1 cup of tea. If I am right, she gets a chance to feel better." Evelyn closed her eyes. The city below them seemed impossibly far away. When she opened them again, the tiredness in her face had changed into something more focused. "Take the cup," she said to the assistant near the door. "Seal it. Call Dr. Patel." Victoria stepped closer. "Evelyn, this is unnecessary." Evelyn turned toward her slowly. "I said call him." The assistant hurried forward with a clear evidence bag from the office supply cabinet. Marcus watched the tea disappear behind plastic. It looked harmless there, pale gold beneath the boardroom lights. Victoria gathered the damp contracts into a stack, but one page had slipped to the floor near Marcus's cart. He bent to pick it up. At the bottom of the page, beneath the company seal, was a line that made his stomach tighten: temporary transfer of executive authority. The date was today. Marcus kept his eyes on the page in his hand while the boardroom moved around him in clipped voices and nervous footsteps. Temporary transfer of executive authority. The words sat beneath the Carter Meridian seal in dark blue ink, followed by a blank line where Evelyn Carter's signature was supposed to go. Marcus did not need a business degree to understand what it meant. If Evelyn signed, Victoria would take control of the company while Evelyn was too sick to argue. He slid the page back onto the table without drawing attention to it. His job had taught him that people revealed more when they believed no one important was listening. Victoria was already speaking to the board in a low, careful voice. "The presentation should continue," she said. "Evelyn needs rest, and the investors cannot be left waiting." Evelyn stood slowly from her chair. Her knees seemed unsteady, but she kept one hand on the table until she found her balance. "The presentation is cancelled," she said. Her voice was quiet, yet every person in the room heard it. Victoria's smile tightened. "You have spent 6 months preparing for this expansion. Then it can wait one day." Evelyn looked toward the assistant holding the sealed cup. "No one touches that bag except Dr. Patel." The assistant nodded and hurried from the room. Marcus reached for the handle of his cleaning cart. He knew when he was no longer wanted. He had interrupted the most powerful people in the building, and even if Evelyn had listened, he could already feel the consequences waiting in the hallway. As he turned toward the service entrance, Evelyn spoke again. "Mr. Reed." Marcus stopped. "Please stay." Victoria looked at her sharply. "Evelyn, there is no reason for him to remain." "There is," Evelyn said. "He noticed something everyone else missed." Marcus did not know what to do with that. Being seen was not always a gift. Sometimes it made people angry. He parked the cart beside the wall and stood near the door, careful not to take up more space than necessary. The board members began collecting their folders. Some avoided looking at him. Others stared openly, as if they were trying to decide whether he had crossed a line or saved someone from crossing one. Evelyn picked up the transfer document and read it slowly. Her face changed as she reached the final paragraph. "Why is this dated today?" she asked. Victoria folded her arms. "Because you have been unwell. The board asked me to prepare an emergency option." An older board member cleared his throat. "We discussed contingency planning, Evelyn. We did not approve a transfer." Victoria's eyes flickered toward him. It was only a second, but Marcus saw it. "It is not a transfer," Victoria said. "It is a temporary safeguard. You know how the markets react to uncertainty." Evelyn placed the paper flat on the table. "And when were you planning to tell me?" Victoria's expression softened into concern that looked practiced. "I was waiting for the right moment." Marcus thought of the tea arriving at 3:15. He thought of the diffuser running every afternoon. He thought of Evelyn walking through the halls with her shoulders squared, pretending she was not struggling to breathe. The right moment, he realized, was probably supposed to be when she was too tired to question anything. "Ms. Carter," Marcus said carefully, "may I ask something?" Victoria gave a humorless laugh. "You have asked quite enough." Evelyn raised one hand. "Go ahead." Marcus looked at the diffuser on the shelf near the window. It was small, white, and expensive-looking, with a thin ribbon of scented mist curling from the top. "Who has access to your office after hours?" Evelyn followed his gaze. "My assistant, security, building maintenance, and Victoria." "Does anyone else handle your tea?" "My assistant orders it," Evelyn said. "Victoria arranged the wellness program." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then somebody should check the delivery records. The tea boxes. The diffuser oils. Everything." Victoria stepped forward. "This is becoming absurd. You are allowing a janitor to accuse senior staff without evidence." Marcus felt the words settle between them. Janitor. Not Marcus. Not Mr. Reed. A label meant to remind everyone who was allowed to speak. He looked at Victoria, then at Evelyn. "I am not accusing anyone," he said. "I am asking questions because somebody should have asked them sooner." Evelyn held his gaze. For the first time, Marcus saw something behind her exhaustion. Not just fear. Anger. "Call building security," she said, "and have them preserve all access logs from my office for the last 30 days. Victoria's face went still. Outside the glass walls, the city shone under a gray morning sky. Inside the boardroom, Marcus understood that the spilled tea had not ended anything. It had only opened the first door. Security arrived within minutes, not with flashing lights or raised voices, but with tablets, keycards, and the careful expressions of people who understood that something had shifted on the 58th floor. Marcus stood near his cleaning cart, while two officers spoke quietly with Evelyn beside the boardroom windows. Victoria remained by the table, her charcoal gray dress perfectly smooth, though the folder in her hands had begun to bend beneath the pressure of her fingers. The board members had not left. They sat in uneasy silence, watching the access logs appear on a screen at the end of the room. Marcus tried not to stare, but he could not stop thinking about the way Victoria had said janitor. It was not the first time someone had used a job title to make him feel smaller. At Carter Meridian, people often stepped around his cart without looking at him. They left half-finished coffees on conference tables and spoke over him as though he were part of the furniture. Most days, Marcus let it pass. He had a daughter to raise, a rent payment due on the first of the month, and a promise to himself that he would not let strangers decide how much dignity he deserved. But standing there now, he understood that being ignored had given him something none of them had expected. He had seen everything. "Mr. Reed," Evelyn said. Marcus looked up. She had moved away from the window, and though her face was still pale, there was more steadiness in her posture. "You said you noticed a pattern." "Start from the beginning." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Evelyn, this is not an investigation interview." "It is now," Evelyn replied. Marcus took a breath. "The first time I noticed something was about 3 weeks ago. You were in your office after everyone else left. I was cleaning the hallway, and I heard you coughing. Your assistant brought in tea, and about 20 minutes later you left early." Evelyn nodded slowly. "That was after the product launch. Then it happened again the next Tuesday," Marcus continued. "And last Thursday. The diffuser was running every time. The same scent. Lavender and citrus." Victoria gave a small dismissive laugh. "Those are common sense. There is nothing suspicious about a diffuser." Marcus turned toward her. "Maybe not. But my daughter has asthma triggered by certain fragrance oils. Her doctor taught me that common does not mean safe for everybody." The room became quiet. Evelyn's expression softened for a moment. "Your daughter has asthma?" "Yes, ma'am. Nia is 8. Marcus looked down at his hands. "She is doing well now. But I learned to pay attention." Victoria's voice sharpened. "A child's asthma is not the same as a chief executive officer's health." "No," Marcus said. "But it is enough to know that somebody should ask a doctor before putting fragrance in a closed office." One of the security officers tapped the screen. "We have the office access records," he said. "For the last 30 days, the usual entries are Ms. Carter, her executive assistant, maintenance, and Ms. Blake." Victoria lifted her chin. "Of course I have access. I am the chief operating officer." The officer nodded. "There are also repeated entries after 8 p.m. on evenings when Ms. Carter was not scheduled to be here." A board member leaned forward. "For what purpose?" Victoria's gaze did not leave the officer. "I often work late." Marcus remembered the nights he had seen light beneath Evelyn's office door after the executive floor was supposed to be empty. He had assumed Evelyn was inside. Now he was not so sure. "Can you check the service elevator records too?" he asked. The officer looked at him. "Why?" Marcus pointed toward the cart. "The tea deliveries do not come through the front desk after hours. I have seen boxes near the service elevator. Small brown boxes with no company logo." Victoria's face changed. It was not much. A tightening around the mouth. A flicker in her eyes. But Marcus saw it. Evelyn saw it too. "Pull the service elevator records," Evelyn said. Victoria stepped closer to her, lowering her voice. "You are tired, Evelyn. You are letting this become personal." Evelyn looked at her for a long moment. "It became personal when someone decided my health was useful." The security officer's tablet chimed. He studied the screen, then looked up. There is another issue. The camera outside Ms. Carter's office was manually disabled 3 times this month. Marcus felt the air leave the room. The officer continued. Each time, it was restored before morning. No one spoke. Victoria's folder slipped slightly in her hands, and one folded page fell to the floor. Marcus saw a pharmacy label attached to a small receipt. The name on it was not Evelyn Carter's. It was Victoria Blake's. The receipt lay on the carpet between Victoria's polished shoes and Marcus's worn work boots. Nobody reached for it at first. The small white label seemed too ordinary to matter, but Marcus had learned that ordinary things could carry the biggest warnings. A cup of tea. A scent in the air. A paper left on a table. Evelyn looked down at the receipt, then slowly raised her eyes to Victoria. "Pick it up," she said. Victoria did not move. "It is a personal prescription," she answered. "It has nothing to do with this." Her voice remained calm, but the careful softness had disappeared. Marcus watched Evelyn's face. The exhaustion was still there, yet something firmer had begun to take its place. She bent down herself, lifted the paper, and read the pharmacy label. Her expression tightened. "This was filled 3 weeks ago," Evelyn said. "The same week my symptoms started." Victoria crossed her arms. "You are connecting things that do not belong together." "Then explain them," Evelyn replied. "Explain the disabled camera. Explain the late-night access. Explain why you prepared a transfer of authority without board approval." Victoria looked toward the board members, as if she expected someone to rescue her from the questions. No one did. The older man with silver hair lowered his gaze. Another board member closed her folder and placed both hands in her lap. The room had changed. Marcus could feel it in the silence. People who had dismissed him minutes earlier were now waiting for him to notice the next detail. He did not want that kind of attention. He only wanted Evelyn to be safe and to get home before Nia's bedtime. But he knew he could not walk away while the truth was still half hidden. "The receipt does not prove anything," Marcus said. Victoria turned sharply toward him. "Of course it does not. You are not a doctor, Mr. Reed." "No," Marcus said. "But I know the tea boxes are delivered through the service elevator. I know the diffuser oil gets replaced on nights when the camera is off. And I know the tea tray was already in the boardroom before anyone arrived this morning." Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. "You have been watching me?" Marcus shook his head. "I have been doing my job." The words settled heavily in the room. Evelyn looked at the security officer. "Search the delivery records for the tea and diffuser supplies. Check the billing account, the vendor, and every order placed in the last 30 days. The officer nodded and stepped aside to make a call. Victoria took one slow breath. "Evelyn, you are making a mistake. You are under stress, and this man is feeding your fear because he wants to feel important." Marcus felt the sting of it, but before he could answer, Evelyn spoke. "Do not speak about him as if he is not standing here." Victoria's eyes widened slightly. Evelyn continued, her voice gaining strength. "Marcus noticed I was sick when everyone else told me I was overworked. He asked questions when you told me to rest. That does not make him important. It makes him attentive." Marcus looked away for a moment. Praise made him uncomfortable, especially in rooms like this. But he thought of Nia again, of her serious little face when she reminded him to bring home the cinnamon rolls from the bakery near their apartment. He wanted her to grow up believing that paying attention mattered, even when powerful people wanted to make you feel invisible. A soft chime sounded from the security officer's tablet. He read the screen, then looked toward Evelyn. "The tea and diffuser supplies were billed through a private wellness vendor," he said. "The vendor was approved by Ms. Blake." Victoria's shoulders went still. "That is standard procedure," she said. "The vendor also delivered a second product," the officer continued. "A concentrated botanical additive. The invoice is listed as a fragrance stabilizer." Evelyn's face went pale again, but this time she did not reach for the chair. Was it delivered to my office? Yes, the officer said. On the same dates as the disabled cameras. Marcus remembered the bitter note beneath the lavender scent. His stomach tightened. Dr. Patel needs to see those invoices, he said. Victoria's eyes hardened. You are enjoying this, she said. Marcus met her gaze. No. I am scared of what could have happened if nobody listened. For the first time, Victoria looked away. Then Evelyn's phone rang on the table. The screen showed Dr. Patel's name. Evelyn answered on speaker, her hand steady despite the color draining from her face. Doctor, she said, did you test the tea? There was a pause on the line. Then Dr. Patel spoke, and his voice was grave with concern. Evelyn, do not consume anything from that tea service. The preliminary results show a substance that can interfere with your prescribed medication. For a moment, no one in the boardroom seemed to breathe. Dr. Patel's words remained on the speakerphone, calm but unmistakably serious. Evelyn stood with one hand resting on the edge of the table, her gaze fixed on the sealed evidence bag where the pale gold tea waited beneath clear plastic. What kind of substance? She asked. I cannot give you a final answer until the lab completes the analysis, Dr. Patel said. But the preliminary screen suggests a botanical compound that can intensify the side effects of your current medication. It could explain the dizziness, fatigue, nausea, and shortness of breath you have been experiencing. You need to avoid the tea and any related fragrance products until we know more. Victoria stepped closer to the phone. Doctor, with respect, that sounds speculative. Dr. Patel paused. Ms. Blake, I am not speculating. I am advising my patient to avoid a possible interaction. The sharpness in his voice made the room even quieter. Evelyn closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them again. Thank you, doctor. Please send the written report to my private email and to legal counsel. I will, he said. And Evelyn, please come in today. I want to examine you myself. I will. She ended the call and set the phone down. Marcus watched her shoulders rise and fall. He had expected anger. Maybe even fear. Instead, Evelyn looked like someone trying to understand how many days of her life had been stolen by something she had been told was harmless. Victoria moved toward her, her expression rearranging itself into concern. Evelyn, you should go home. You are not well enough to handle this. Evelyn looked at her. You have been telling me that for weeks. Victoria's lips parted, but no answer came. Marcus stood beside his cart, wishing he could become invisible again. The attention in the room pressed against him. Some board members were looking at him with respect now, but others looked uncomfortable, as if they were realizing how often they had passed him without seeing him at all. He did not need their apologies. Not yet. He needed them to stop acting like a person's job determined the value of what they noticed. The security officer returned with another tablet. Ms. Carter, we located the vendor files. The wellness company was registered 9 months ago. It has one listed owner, a consulting firm connected to Ms. Blake's brother-in-law. Victoria's face hardened. That is irrelevant. It is relevant, Evelyn said. Her voice was low, but it carried across the room. You approved the vendor, authorized after-hours deliveries, disabled the camera, and prepared documents to take control of my company on the same morning I was expected to sign them. Victoria's eyes flashed. I was protecting the company from your decline. By hiding information from me? Evelyn asked. By deciding I was incapable before I had the chance to understand what was happening. Victoria looked toward the board, searching for agreement. She has been sick for weeks. Investors are nervous. Someone had to be prepared. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Victoria did not sound sorry. She sounded offended that the plan had been interrupted. Evelyn straightened, even though the effort showed in her face. Prepared is not the same as entitled, she said. You do not get to make decisions about my health because you believe you would run this company better. The older board member rose slowly from his chair. Ms. Blake, until legal counsel arrives, you are placed on administrative leave. Victoria stared at him. You cannot do that. We can, he said. And we are. For the first time, the polished confidence left her face. She looked at Marcus, and the anger in her eyes was so direct that he felt it like a hand against his chest. You have no idea what you have started, she said. Marcus did not raise his voice. I started by asking someone not to drink a cup of tea. Security escorted Victoria toward the door without touching her, leaving space for her to walk out on her own. Before she crossed the threshold, she turned back toward Evelyn. You think this ends with me? She said. Then she was gone. The door closed softly behind her. Evelyn remained standing for a moment, staring at the place where Victoria had been. Then her knees weakened. Marcus moved forward without thinking, but he stopped an arm's length away. Would you like to sit down? He asked. Evelyn looked at him, and something in her expression broke open. Not weakness. Not gratitude alone. The shock of realizing that the person who had treated her most carefully that morning was the man everyone else had expected her to ignore. She nodded. Marcus pulled out the nearest chair, and she sat. Outside the windows, the city kept moving below them, unaware that a single interrupted sip had changed everything. Marcus stood beside the chair while Evelyn rested both hands on the edge of the walnut table. The boardroom had emptied around them in slow, uncertain movements. Legal counsel had been called. Security had begun collecting records. The sealed cup of tea had been carried away. Yet the air still held the faint sweetness of lavender, and Marcus could not stop noticing it. He wanted to leave. His shift had ended nearly an hour ago, and Nia would be waiting at home with her homework spread across the kitchen table, pretending she was not tired because she liked hearing the key turn in the lock. But Evelyn looked smaller now than she had when he first saw her at the head of the table. Not weak. Just human in a way the magazines never showed. You should go to the doctor, Marcus said. Evelyn gave a tired breath that almost became a laugh. You sound like Dr. Patel. He is probably used to people ignoring good advice. Evelyn looked at him then, and the corner of her mouth lifted slightly. It was the first real expression Marcus had seen on her face all morning. And you are not? Marcus glanced toward his cart. I am used to people ignoring me. The words came out before he could soften them. Evelyn's smile faded. She looked around the boardroom, at the chairs where executives had sat, at the glass walls that reflected the city back at itself. I am sorry, she said. Marcus did not answer right away. He had heard apologies before, usually after someone realized they needed something from him. You do not have to apologize for everyone, he said. No, Evelyn replied. But I can apologize for what I did not see. Her voice was steady, without the polished language of a public statement. You have worked here for how long? Almost 2 years. And I did not know your name until today. Marcus looked down at the cleaning cart. Most people do not. Evelyn's eyes lowered. That is not an excuse. Before he could respond, a soft knock sounded at the boardroom door. A young legal assistant stepped inside, holding a tablet. Ms. Carter, the security team found the vendor correspondence. There are emails between Ms. Blake and the wellness company. Evelyn straightened. Send them to counsel. The assistant hesitated. There is something else. One email mentions your father. The room seemed to cool. Marcus watched Evelyn's face lose color again, though this time it was not illness. My father? She asked. The assistant nodded. The email says the old Carter records must stay sealed, the way they were after Arthur Carter's death. Evelyn stared at the tablet. Her father had been gone for 12 years. Marcus had seen his portrait in the lobby, a stern man with silver hair and a businessman's smile, standing beside the first Carter Meridian headquarters. I want to see it, Evelyn said. The assistant handed over the tablet. Evelyn read the message once, then again. Her fingers tightened around the edge. This cannot be real, she whispered. Marcus did not ask to see it. He had learned that grief had its own private language. Instead, he looked toward the windows. The sky over Manhattan had begun to brighten, turning the buildings across the avenue into pale shapes behind the morning haze. "My father died after a sudden illness," Evelyn said after a long silence. "Everyone said it was stress. He had been working too much. That was the explanation for everything." Marcus turned back toward her. "Did he have the same symptoms?" Evelyn looked at him, and fear moved through her gray eyes. "I do not know. I was 20. I was told not to ask questions." The words were quiet, but they carried years inside them. Marcus thought of Nia. He thought of how often adults told children not to ask questions because the truth was inconvenient. "Maybe it is time to ask," he said. Evelyn looked down at the email again. "I do not know where to begin." Marcus almost told her that he did not either. He was a cleaning supervisor who had spent the morning interrupting board meetings and pointing at teacups. But he knew how to begin when something felt wrong. You began with what was in front of you. You noticed. You wrote it down. You did not let people rush you past it. "Start with the records," he said. "Your father's medical files. The old vendor contracts. Anything Victoria had access to." Evelyn nodded slowly. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her expression softened. "It is your daughter," she said. Marcus's stomach dropped. He had missed 3 calls from Nia's school aftercare program. He pulled out his phone, seeing the notifications he had not heard over the boardroom noise. Before panic could take hold, he called back. The coordinator answered on the second ring. "Mr. Reed, Nia is fine," she said. "She is waiting with the front desk. She told us you were probably helping someone." Marcus closed his eyes for 1 second. Of course she had said that. "I am on my way," he replied. When he ended the call, Evelyn was watching him. "Go," she said. "Your daughter needs you." Marcus reached for his cart. "She is the reason I noticed." Evelyn stood carefully, holding the table for balance. "Then tell her she helped save me too." Marcus paused at the door. "I will tell her you listened." As he pushed the cart into the hallway, the building felt different. Not kinder. Not yet. But awake. Behind him, Evelyn Carter opened the email again, and far below the executive floor, someone in the records department received an urgent request for a file that had been buried for 12 years. Marcus found Nia sitting at the aftercare desk with her purple backpack at her feet and a half-finished drawing spread across the counter. The moment she saw him, her worried expression softened. "You are late," she said, trying to sound serious, though her small arms were already reaching for him. Marcus set down his work bag and hugged her carefully. "I know. I am sorry." Nia leaned back and studied his face. "Did somebody need help?" Marcus looked at the drawing. It showed a tall building with bright windows, a small figure holding a mop, and another figure sitting at a large table. Above them, Nia had drawn a yellow sun with too many rays. "Yeah," he said. "Somebody did." Nia nodded as if that made perfect sense. "Did you help them?" Marcus smiled despite the long day pressing against his shoulders. "I tried." On the subway ride home, Nia told him about a spelling quiz, a classmate who had traded her apple slices for crackers, and a science lesson about how plants could grow toward light even when they started in the dark. Marcus listened, answering when she needed him to, letting the ordinary rhythm of her voice bring him back to himself. Outside the train window, Manhattan slid past in streaks of gray stone and reflected sky. He thought about Evelyn Carter sitting alone in the boardroom with 12 years of questions opening around her. He thought about Victoria's face when the security officer mentioned the camera logs. Most of all, he thought about the email referring to Arthur Carter's death, as if it were a business problem that had been filed away. At home, their apartment smelled like laundry soap and the chicken soup Marcus had made the night before. Nia changed into pajamas and sat at the kitchen table while he reheated dinner. She watched him add carrots to her bowl. "Dad," she said, "you look like you are thinking too loud." Marcus laughed softly. "Is that what I look like?" "Yes." She took a spoonful of soup, then pointed it at him. You should write it down. You always tell me to write down things that matter. Marcus looked toward the small notebook beside the refrigerator. He used it for grocery lists, work schedules, and reminders about Nia's inhaler. Tonight, he opened it to a clean page and wrote down everything he could remember. 3:15. Tea tray. Diffuser. Service elevator. Camera disabled. Private vendor. Temporary authority transfer. Arthur Carter. He did not know why he was writing it. Maybe because Nia was right. Maybe because once a person had noticed something important, pretending to forget it was another way of letting it disappear. Across town, Evelyn sat in a quiet examination room at Dr. Patel's clinic. The room was smaller than the boardroom and warmer than the executive floor, with a paper-covered examination table, a framed watercolor print, and a window looking out at a narrow street. Without the sharp lines of her suit jacket and the bright lights of the company around her, she looked younger than Marcus had expected. Dr. Patel sat across from her with a tablet in his hands. The lab confirmed the tea contained an additive that should never have been mixed with your medication, he said. The diffuser oil contained a related concentrated fragrance compound. Repeated exposure likely made your symptoms worse. Evelyn stared at the floor. Could it have caused permanent damage? Your tests are encouraging, Dr. Patel said. You came in before the interaction became more serious. But you need rest, monitoring, and a complete review of everything you have been taking. Evelyn closed her eyes. Relief came first, then something heavier. Victoria knew my medication schedule, she said. She helped arrange my wellness program. Dr. Patel's face grew careful. Then your legal team needs to investigate every detail. Evelyn nodded, but her thoughts had already moved to her father. When she returned to Carter Meridian that evening, the executive floor was nearly empty. The office lights were dimmed, and the familiar lavender diffuser had been removed from her desk. On her chair sat a sealed archive box from the records department. Across the top, in faded black letters, were the words Arthur Carter, confidential. Evelyn stood in the doorway for a long moment before touching it. Inside were old board minutes, medical correspondence, vendor invoices, and a photograph of her father standing beside a younger Victoria Blake at the opening of a new company wellness center. Beneath the photograph was a handwritten note in her father's familiar script: review the supplier contracts before it is too late. Evelyn's hand tightened around the note. At that exact moment, Marcus's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He looked down and saw a message from an unknown number. It contained only one sentence: stop asking questions about Carter Meridian if you want your daughter to stay safe. Marcus read the message twice before the meaning reached him. The kitchen seemed to narrow around the glowing screen. Nia was at the table beside him, coloring the edges of a science worksheet with a purple pencil, humming under her breath. Her backpack hung from the chair. Her inhaler sat in its usual place near the fruit bowl. Everything in the room looked exactly as it had 5 seconds earlier, and yet Marcus felt as if someone had opened the front door and let winter into the apartment. He turned the phone face down. Dad? Nia asked. Who was that? Marcus forced his shoulders to relax. Probably a wrong number. She studied him with the serious expression she used when she knew he was not telling her everything. You are thinking too loud again. Marcus managed a small smile. Finish your worksheet, Professor Reed. Nia smiled back, but he could not return his attention to the soup cooling on the stove. He had dealt with hard things before. He had learned how to stretch a paycheck until Friday. He had learned how to sit in a hospital waiting room while doctors spoke in careful voices about his daughter's breathing. He had learned how to walk into rooms where people looked at his skin, his uniform, and his address before they listened to his name. But this was different. This message had reached into the one part of his life he never allowed strangers to touch. He picked up the phone again and took a screenshot. Then he forwarded it to a new contact Evelyn had given him before he left the office, labeled only Executive Security. His thumb hovered over the call button, but he did not press it. He did not want Nia to hear fear in his voice. Instead, he sent a short message, I received a threat mentioning my daughter. I saved the number. Please do not contact me by phone until after 9 p.m. A reply appeared less than a minute later. Understood. An officer will review it immediately. Marcus placed the phone in his pocket and sat beside Nia. How about we make hot chocolate after homework? He asked. Her face brightened. With marshmallows? 2 marshmallows. 3. 2.5. Nia laughed, and the sound loosened something in his chest. Across the city, Evelyn stood alone in her office with her father's archive box open on the desk. The old photograph remained in her hand. Arthur Carter looked confident beside a younger Victoria Blake, both of them smiling beneath a banner for the Wellness Center. Evelyn remembered that day. She had been 20, standing near the back of the crowd in a blue dress her father had chosen because he said it made her look like her mother. A week later he had started feeling tired. A month later he was gone. Her phone rang. It was her legal counsel, Daniel Mercer. We found something, he said without greeting. Evelyn sat down slowly. Tell me. The vendor that supplied the additive in your tea was created under a chain of companies connected to Victoria Blake's family. But that is not the most troubling part. The same vendor name appears in an archived invoice from 12 years ago. Evelyn's hand tightened around the photograph. For my father? Yes. The invoice was marked as a wellness initiative and approved by a former chief operating officer. Victoria was not chief operating officer then, but she was listed as project coordinator. Evelyn stared at the dark office window. Her reflection looked back at her, pale and tired, but no longer uncertain. Was there a medical warning? She asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment. There was a letter from a physician. It warned that the additive could interact with Mr. Carter's heart medication. The letter was never added to his official file. Evelyn closed her eyes. The grief she had carried for 12 years changed shape inside her. It was no longer only grief. It was betrayal. Where is Victoria now? She asked. She left the building before security could complete the leave paperwork. Her company phone is off. Evelyn looked at the photograph again. In the background, almost hidden behind her father's shoulder, was a familiar figure pushing a maintenance cart through the lobby. Marcus had been right about one thing. People revealed themselves when they believed no one important was looking. Evelyn opened her contacts and found his number. She began to type a message, then stopped. Marcus had told her not to call until after 9. She checked the time. 8:43. 15 minutes felt like a long time when someone had threatened a child. She called Daniel again. Send security to Marcus Reed's address, she said. Quietly. No sirens. No uniforms at his door unless he asks. Evelyn, that may be outside company protocol. Then change the protocol. She ended the call and looked down at the old medical warning. At the bottom, beneath a faded signature, someone had written in red ink, "Do not let Arthur sign the transfer documents." Evelyn's breath caught. The same words appeared in the draft agreement Victoria had placed before her that morning, except this time the signature line was waiting for Evelyn Carter. At 9 o'clock, Marcus checked the lock on the apartment door for the third time. Nia had fallen asleep on the couch beneath her favorite yellow blanket, one hand curled around a stuffed rabbit with one ear bent flat. The television played softly with the volume low, and the kitchen clock made each second sound louder than it should have. Marcus stood near the window, looking down at the street lights reflected on wet pavement. He had not told Nia about the message. He would not let fear become something she carried because adults around her had made dangerous choices. But he had packed her school bag anyway. Her inhaler, her favorite sweater, a small notebook, and the photograph of her mother that she kept in the side pocket. He hated himself a little for doing it. He hated that a single text had made him think about leaving home before morning. His phone vibrated. Executive security. 2 plainclothes officers are nearby. They will not approach unless you request assistance. Marcus looked out the window again. Across the street, a dark sedan sat beneath a street lamp. He could not see the people inside, but the sight did not comfort him as much as it should have. It only confirmed that someone had decided his family was part of this now. His phone rang a minute later. Evelyn's name appeared on the screen. Marcus stepped into the kitchen before answering. "Mr. Reed?" she said. Her voice was low and controlled, but he could hear the strain beneath it. "I know you asked not to be called before 9. It is 9 now." Marcus looked at the clock. "What did you find?" There was a pause. "My father's records show the same vendor. The same kind of hidden warning. And the same transfer documents." Marcus rested one hand on the counter. "So Victoria has been planning this for a long time." "Maybe," Evelyn said. "Or someone taught her how." Marcus thought about the message on his phone. Did she send the threat? "We do not know. Security traced the number to a prepaid phone, but it was activated near Carter Meridian this afternoon." Evelyn took a breath. "Marcus, I am sorry. You should not have been pulled into this." He wanted to tell her that apologies did not change what had happened. But he heard something in her voice that made him stop. She was not trying to protect her image. She was trying to protect him. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Nothing tonight," Evelyn said. "I need you and Nia to stay safe. Tomorrow morning, I am calling an emergency board meeting. Legal counsel found a document in my father's archive. It may show that Victoria's family benefited from the same supplier contracts for years." Marcus looked toward the living room. Nia shifted in her sleep and pulled the blanket closer. "Then tomorrow, you make sure nobody gets to hide behind a title," he said. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Will you be there?" Marcus almost laughed. The question felt too large for a man standing barefoot in a small kitchen, wearing a faded gray sweatshirt, while his daughter slept 10 feet away. "I do not know if I belong in a board meeting." "You belong wherever the truth needs someone to say what they saw," Evelyn replied. Marcus closed his eyes. He thought of the people who had stepped around his cart. He thought of Victoria calling him janitor as if the word was meant to end every argument. He thought of Nia telling him to write down things that mattered. "I will be there," he said. After the call ended, Marcus sat at the kitchen table and opened his notebook. He wrote down the time of the threat, the name of the security contact, and everything Evelyn had told him. Then he turned to a fresh page and wrote one more sentence. "Do not let fear decide what is true." Across the city, Evelyn stood in her father's old office, a room that had been sealed since his death. Dust covered the shelves, and the air smelled faintly of paper and cedar. Daniel Mercer had found a locked drawer behind the desk. Inside was a thin black folder marked only with a date from 12 years earlier. Evelyn opened it with shaking hands. The first page was a copy of the same transfer agreement Victoria had tried to place before her. The second page was a handwritten note from Arthur Carter. "If anything happens to me, do not trust the people who tell you to rest before they tell you the truth." Evelyn pressed the note against her chest. For years she had believed her father's death had been an impossible tragedy. Now she understood that someone had turned his exhaustion into an opportunity. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from an unknown number. It contained a photograph taken from across Marcus's street. In the image, his apartment window glowed softly above the sidewalk. Beneath it was a single sentence: "Tomorrow morning, tell Marcus Reed to stay home." The photograph on Evelyn's phone made the room disappear around her. Marcus's apartment window glowed in the dark, small and warm above the sidewalk, and she could see the faint outline of a yellow blanket through the glass. Her throat tightened. The message was not a warning anymore. It was proof that whoever had been watching her had chosen to watch Marcus too. Evelyn called Daniel Mercer before she allowed herself to think. "Send the photograph to security," she said. "Increase protection around Marcus Reed and his daughter immediately. Quietly, but do not make it optional." Daniel's voice sharpened. "Evelyn, we need to involve the police. Do it. And preserve every message. Every record. I am done letting people call this a misunderstanding." She ended the call and stood in her father's old office, holding his handwritten note in one hand and her phone in the other. The room had been closed for 12 years, but tonight it felt full of voices. Her father telling her to be careful. Victoria telling her to rest. Marcus telling her that somebody should have asked questions sooner. Evelyn looked at the black folder on the desk and understood that the next morning could not be only a board meeting. It had to be the moment the silence ended. Before sunrise, Marcus woke to a soft knock at the apartment door. He had barely slept. Every sound in the hallway had pulled him awake, and each time he opened his eyes, he checked the couch to make sure Nia was still there. She had moved to her bedroom some time after midnight, leaving the yellow blanket folded in a small heap beside the cushions. Marcus looked through the peephole and saw a woman in a dark coat standing beside a man holding an identification badge. He opened the door only as far as the chain allowed. "Mr. Reed?" the woman asked quietly. "My name is Detective Lena Ortiz. We received a report about threatening messages." Marcus looked past her toward the stairwell. "My daughter is asleep." "We know," Detective Ortiz said. "We will keep this brief." She explained that officers had reviewed the number used to send the messages and were checking nearby cameras. A patrol car would remain close to the building. Marcus listened, nodding when he was supposed to, but his eyes kept moving toward Nia's bedroom door. "Do you think whoever sent it will come here?" he asked. Detective Ortiz did not offer false comfort. "We do not have evidence of that. But the message was meant to frighten you. We are taking it seriously." After they left, Marcus stood in the quiet hallway for a moment before closing the door. Nia appeared in the doorway of her room, her hair messy and her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. "Are we in trouble?" she whispered. Marcus crouched in front of her. "No, sweetheart. Some people are helping us because Dad asked questions at work." Nia looked down at the rabbit's bent ear. "Did the mean lady get mad?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. Children understood more than adults wanted to admit. "Maybe," he said. "But being mad does not make someone right." Nia thought about that. Then she held out her hand. "Can I come with you today?" Marcus wanted to say yes. He wanted to keep her where he could see her. But he knew the safest place for her was school, surrounded by teachers who knew her name, and a routine that did not belong to fear. "You are going to school," he said gently. "And I am going to a meeting." "The big building meeting?" "Yes." Nia nodded. "Then remember what you told me." Marcus smiled faintly. "Write down things that matter?" "No." She pointed at his chest. "Do not let people make you feel small." Marcus swallowed. "I will remember." By 9 o'clock, the Carter Meridian boardroom was full again. This time, no tea sat on the table. No diffuser mist curled through the air. Instead, folders marked confidential lay in front of every board member, and 2 detectives stood near the back wall beside company counsel. Evelyn entered wearing a simple navy suit, her face still tired but clear. Marcus arrived a few minutes later in a clean button-down shirt and dark slacks, carrying the notebook Nia had reminded him to keep. Several executives looked surprised to see him there. One man began to say something about employee access, but Evelyn raised her hand. "Marcus Reed is here at my request," she said. "He is not here as staff. He is here as a witness." Marcus took a seat near the end of the table. His hands were steady when he opened the notebook. Across from him, an empty chair waited where Victoria Blake had once sat. Then the boardroom door opened, and Victoria stepped inside with an attorney at her side. Her face was composed, but her eyes went directly to Marcus. "I was told this was an internal meeting," she said. Evelyn met her gaze. "It was. Until you decided to make it about my health, my father, and an employee's child." Victoria's attorney leaned forward. "My client denies any involvement in those messages." "Then she will have no objection to the evidence being reviewed," Evelyn replied. Daniel Mercer placed the old medical warning on the table beside the vendor invoices. Marcus watched Victoria's expression change when she saw her father's name printed on the earliest contract. Evelyn spoke without raising her voice. For 12 years, this company has treated my father's death as an unfortunate mystery. Today, we find out who benefited from that mystery. Daniel Mercer began with the records, not accusations. He placed the old vendor invoices beside the recent ones, then aligned the dates with the medical warnings that had never reached Arthur Carter's official file. The pattern was impossible to ignore. 12 years earlier, a wellness supplier connected to Victoria Blake's family had been paid through a chain of consulting companies. The same supplier had returned this year under a new name, approved by Victoria, with the same hidden additive listed under harmless language. Around the table, board members turned pages slowly. No one spoke. Marcus sat with his notebook open in front of him, but he did not need to read from it yet. He watched Evelyn instead. She had gone pale when Daniel mentioned her father, but she did not look away from the evidence. Victoria sat across from her with her attorney at her side, her posture straight, her hands folded neatly over one another. "This is circumstantial," the attorney said. "There is no proof that Ms. Blake knew how any product would affect Arthur Carter or Evelyn Carter." Evelyn looked at him. "Then why were the medical warnings removed?" Daniel slid a printed email across the table. "This message was recovered from an archived company server. It was sent by Arthur Carter's physician to the former chief operating officer and copied to Victoria Blake, who was then the wellness project coordinator." Victoria's attorney reached for the paper, but Evelyn spoke first. "Read it aloud." Daniel's voice was measured. "The supplier additive may interfere with Mr. Carter's heart medication. I strongly recommend immediate discontinuation and a full review of all related products." He paused. The email was opened. No action was documented. Victoria's eyes remained on the table. "I was 26, she said. "I was not responsible for executive decisions. You were responsible enough to approve the same supplier for me," Evelyn replied. Victoria looked up. "I approved a wellness program. I did not poison anyone." The word hung in the room, too harsh and too final. Marcus saw Evelyn flinch, but she held herself still. Detective Ortiz stepped forward from the back wall. "No one is making a final legal conclusion in this meeting," she said. "But we have confirmed that the anonymous threats sent to Mr. Reed and Ms. Carter came from a prepaid phone purchased by an employee of a private security company. That company was paid by a consulting firm linked to the same vendor network." Victoria's attorney stood. "My client has no connection to that." "Then she can explain why the consulting firm was billed to her corporate expense account," Daniel said. He placed another document on the table. Victoria's composure finally cracked. Her hand moved toward the paper, then stopped. "You do not understand," she said. Her voice was no longer polished. "Arthur was going to destroy everything. He wanted to cancel the contracts, expose the board, and pull the company apart. My father said there would be thousands of jobs lost." Evelyn stared at her. "So you decided he was easier to manage when he was sick?" Victoria's eyes filled, but Marcus could not tell whether the emotion was regret or the shock of being cornered. "I did not know what they would do," she said. "I only knew that if Arthur stepped aside, the company would survive." "My father died," Evelyn said. The room became silent again. "And when I got sick, you prepared the same papers." Victoria looked at Evelyn with something close to desperation. "You were not thinking clearly. The company needed someone steady." Evelyn's face hardened. "The company needed honesty." Marcus felt every eye turned toward him when Daniel nodded in his direction. "Mr. Reed, would you tell the board what you observed?" Marcus stood. His legs felt heavy, but his voice did not shake. He described the tea arriving at 3:15, the diffuser missed, the after-hours deliveries, the disabled cameras, and the transfer agreement waiting on the same morning Evelyn became too weak to continue the meeting. He did not add anger to the facts. He did not need to. When he finished, the oldest board member removed his glasses and looked at Victoria. "You used a man's work uniform to dismiss the only witness who was paying attention," he said. Victoria looked at Marcus for a long moment. I never meant for his daughter to be involved," she whispered. Marcus held her gaze. "But she was. That is what happens when people believe they can control other people's lives." Detective Ortiz stepped toward Victoria and her attorney. "Ms. Blake, we need you to come with us for further questioning." Victoria rose slowly. No one touched her. No one raised a voice. She looked once toward the chair where Evelyn's father had once sat, then toward the windows. "I thought I was saving the company," she said. Evelyn's answer was quiet. "A company is not worth saving if it asks you to lose your soul." Victoria left the boardroom between the detectives and her attorney, and the door closed behind her. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Evelyn looked at the board members, at the files, at Marcus standing near the end of the table. "Effective immediately," she said. "Every vendor contract will be independently reviewed. Every employee will have a safe way to report concerns. And no one in this company will ever be treated as invisible again." Marcus lowered his eyes, thinking of Nia. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Detective Ortiz. "We found the person who sent the photographs. There is one more name you need to see." Marcus stepped into a hallway before opening Detective Ortiz's message. The boardroom behind him had begun to fill with low voices, lawyers, and people making promises about reviews and reforms, but he needed one quiet breath before he looked at the screen. The name waiting there was not Victoria Blake. It was Daniel Mercer. For a second, Marcus thought he had read it wrong. Daniel had stood beside Evelyn all morning. He had uncovered the old records. He had placed the invoices on the table. Marcus read the message again. The person who sent the photographs was an investigator hired through a legal consulting account. The authorization trail led to Daniel Mercer's office. Detective Ortiz had added one more line. "We do not yet know whether he ordered the threats or whether someone used his account without his knowledge." Marcus looked through the glass wall. Daniel stood near Evelyn, speaking softly while she gathered the papers that had changed her life. He looked calm. Too calm, Marcus thought, though he knew fear could make anyone suspicious. He did not want to accuse another person without proof. That was how people like Victoria had survived for so long, by turning assumptions into weapons. Marcus sent one reply to Detective Ortiz: "Evelyn needs to know, but please verify everything first." When he returned to the boardroom, Evelyn noticed his face immediately. "What is it?" she asked. Marcus hesitated. Daniel looked up from the table. The room seemed to hold its breath again. "Detective Ortiz found another name connected to the photographs," Marcus said. "She is still verifying it." Evelyn's eyes searched his. "Whose name?" Marcus did not look away. "Daniel Mercer's." Daniel went still. Then he slowly placed his pen on the table. "I can explain the account," he said. His voice was controlled, but a shadow crossed his face. "My office uses outside investigators for corporate matters. The account was active during the vendor review." Evelyn's expression tightened. "Did you authorize anyone to watch Marcus Reed's home?" "No," Daniel said immediately. "Never." Marcus watched him carefully. "Then who had access?" Daniel looked down at his laptop. "My senior paralegal, the finance administrator, and me." Evelyn reached for the phone on the table. "Call Detective Ortiz." "Now." Daniel did not resist. He gave the detective the names, the passwords, the account records, and the authorization history. For the next hour, no one left the floor. Security checked offices. Legal staff reviewed access logs. Evelyn sat in her father's chair, not as a daughter looking for answers anymore, but as a leader refusing to let another secret find a place to hide. Marcus remained nearby, his notebook closed in his hands. He thought about Nia at school. He thought about how close he had come to staying home because someone wanted fear to make the decision for him. Then Detective Ortiz returned. She held a tablet and looked directly at Daniel. "Your account was accessed from a remote device late last night," she said. "The device belongs to your finance administrator, Caleb Voss." Daniel's face strained of color. Caleb has worked with me for 7 years. He also handled payment approvals for the consulting firm connected to Victoria Blake's family," Detective Ortiz said. "He has been detained for questioning. The evidence indicates he arranged the surveillance after Victoria was placed on leave. We are still investigating whether she directed him." Evelyn closed her eyes, and for a moment Marcus saw how exhausted she was. Not from illness now, but from the weight of every truth arriving at once. Daniel sat down slowly. "I should have seen it," he said. Marcus understood that feeling. Seeing was not the same as knowing. But when the signs were there, people had to be willing to look. Evelyn opened her eyes and turned toward him. "We all should have seen more," she said. "That is what changes today." By late afternoon, the board issued a statement that Victoria Blake had been removed from all company authority pending the investigation. The vendor contracts were suspended. An independent review began. Evelyn refused to make Marcus into a symbol for the cameras or a story for the company newsletter. Instead, she asked him to meet her in the lobby after school. Marcus arrived with Nia beside him, her small hand tucked into his. The lobby looked different without the old portrait of Arthur Carter hanging alone above the reception desk. Evelyn had placed a new framed photograph nearby, one of Arthur standing with employees from every department at the company's first holiday gathering. Marcus noticed a maintenance worker in the background, smiling beside a catering table. "Is that your dad?" Nia asked Evelyn. Evelyn nodded. "Yes." Nia looked at the photograph for a moment. "He looks nice." Evelyn smiled softly. "He was." Then she knelt so she was at Nia's eye level. "Your father helped me when I needed someone to notice what was wrong." Nia looked up at Marcus. "I told him to write things down." Marcus laughed quietly. Evelyn's eyes warmed. "That was very good advice." She stood and faced Marcus. "I cannot undo the way this company treated you before today," she said. "But I can make sure your voice is never ignored again. I would like you to lead a new employee safety and reporting program, with full pay, training, and the authority to bring concerns directly to me." Marcus looked at Nia, then at the building around them. For 2 years he had walked these floors feeling like a shadow. Now Evelyn was not offering him a favor. She was offering him responsibility, because she had finally understood what he had always known. Attention was not a small thing. It could protect people. It could change the direction of a life. "I will do it," Marcus said. Outside, the late afternoon sun spilled across the sidewalk, turning the glass doors gold. Nia squeezed his hand. "Does this mean you are not just the cleaning guy anymore?" Marcus looked down at her and smiled. "I was never just the cleaning guy." Evelyn heard him, and she smiled too. As they stepped into the light, Marcus's phone vibrated once more. It was a message from Detective Ortiz. "Caleb Voss is asking to speak with Evelyn Carter. He says Victoria Blake was only following someone else's instructions."